Of Mice and Men is set in California during the Great Depression, a time when many men traveled from place to place looking for temporary farm work. The story centers on two migrant laborers, George Milton and Lenny Small, who differ greatly in personality but depend on each other for survival. George is intelligent, cautious, and realistic, while Lenny is large, physically powerful, and mentally disabled. Lenny has a childlike mind and often gets into trouble because he does not understand his own strength or the consequences of his actions. George acts as Lenny's protector and decision-maker, even though the responsibility often frustrates him. At the beginning of the novella, George and Lenny arrive near the town of Soledad after fleeing their previous job in Weed. Lenny had frightened a young woman there by touching her dress, leading the men to escape before Lenny could be accused of something worse. As they rest by a river, George reminds Lenny of the rules he must follow to stay safe. George also retells their shared dream. One day they will save enough money to buy a small piece of land where they can live freely, grow crops, and raise animals. Lenny is especially focused on the idea of tending rabbits, which symbolizes comfort, innocence, and hope. When George and Lenny begin work at a ranch, they are introduced to a range of characters who reflect different forms of loneliness and broken dreams. Candy, an old ranch handyman, worries about being useless because of his age and disability. Crooks, the black stable hand, lives isolated in a separate room due to racism and longs for companionship and dignity. Curly, the boss's aggressive son, constantly tries to assert his authority, particularly over Lenny. Curly's wife, whose name is never revealed, dreams of becoming a movie star but is trapped in a lonely and unhappy marriage. She is often misunderstood and judged, yet she too seeks attention and connection. Candy becomes interested in George and Lenny's dream and offers to contribute his savings, making the dream feel briefly attainable. For a moment, the men believe they might actually escape their harsh reality. This sense of hope contrasts sharply with the growing tension surrounding Lenny's behavior. Lenny accidentally kills a puppy by handling it too roughly, foreshadowing later tragedy. His obsession with soft things and inability to control his strength highlight the dangers he poses despite his innocent intentions. The climax occurs when Lenny meets Curly's wife alone in the barn. She allows Lenny to stroke her hair, but when she becomes frightened and screams, Lenny panics and accidentally kills her by snapping her neck. Terrified, Lenny flees to the riverbank, just as George had instructed him to do if something went wrong. When Curly discovers his wife's body, he forms a lynch mob to hunt Lenny down, driven by anger and revenge rather than justice. George realizes that Lenny will either be brutally murdered or locked away and abused if caught. Finding Lenny by the river, George calmly retells the story of their dream one last time, allowing Lenny to die. Believing in a peaceful future, George then shoots Lenny himself, sparing him fear and suffering. The novella ends with George devastated and alone, his dream destroyed. His act raises difficult moral questions about mercy, responsibility, and sacrifice. Through this tragic ending, Steinbeck emphasizes the fragility of dreams and the loneliness of the human condition, especially for those living on the margins of society.